Everyone knew I loved Claire Sterling, loved her down to the bone. From awkward kids to restless young adults, my greatest joy was being in her orbit. Even when she was cold, I never flinched. To everyone else, I was the devoted puppy dog, the guy who would do anything for her. It all started with an understanding between our families, the Bishops and the Sterlings, an arrangement made when we were practically still in diapers. She was always meant to be my fiancée. This pact didn't just tie us together. It fused our families, making them allies in the boardroom and beyond. Finally, I got what I always wanted. I married Claire Sterling. I thought it was the beginning of my life. Instead, it was a death sentence. After we were married, I discovered she was keeping a lover on the side. Worse, they were plotting together, scheming to dismantle my life and bleed my assets dry, one calculated move at a time. The history we shared, the bond forged since childhood, proved terrifyingly fragile in the face of greed. It shattered completely. In that moment, my love died. Every ounce of trust and affection evaporated into nothing. From then on, my world had only one focus: the Sterling Corporation. It was her greatest strength, her ultimate vulnerability, and it was now my target. Goodbye, my wife. The love I once felt is ash. I will never give you another chance to hurt me, and I will never, ever give you the chance to regret it. One late at night, my phone screen lit up, casting a pale glow in the dark room. A new message. Leo, something came up at work. I have to fly out to Lake Geneva for a bit. I'll be back before you know it. Love you. It was from Claire. I stared at the message, my thumb tracing the outline of the screen. A bitter, self-mocking smile touched my lips. Before I could even process the manufactured warmth of her words, I saw her shadow slip out the front door and into the waiting town car. The vehicle vanished into the night, heading for the highway north. For the past year, this had become our routine. Nearly every week, she'd race off to Lake Geneva, always under the guise of a business trip. In the beginning, I'd clung to a desperate hope, making excuses for her. But now, the truth was a bitter winter wind, tearing my last illusions to shreds. I stood motionless before the floor-to-ceiling window, the cherry of my cigarette glowing in the darkness. The smoke swirled around me, blurring the city lights into a hazy watercolor. I took a long drag, the acrid taste filling my lungs, but it couldn't numb the gaping wound in my chest. Only the slight tremor in my hand betrayed the storm raging inside me. My assistant stood silently nearby, saying nothing. The briefcase in his hand was heavy with files, each page a meticulously documented piece of Claire's betrayal. And did her parents know? Of course they did. They just chose to look the other way, maybe even tacitly encouraged it. In their eyes, I was just a pawn in the Bishop family's game, a son with no inheritance rights, a negligible piece on the board. 20 years of devotion, all for this cold, calculated betrayal. To say it didn't hurt would be a lie. I had given her my whole heart, and she had stomped on it without a second thought. We didn't have to end up here, but she chose the wrong path, and she would not like where it led. I let out a few short, cold laughs and turned to my assistant. My voice was low but steady. Good work. Keep going. This game was just getting started. A week later, Claire finally deigned to return. In those 7 days, it was as if I existed in a separate universe. Not a single phone call. Not one text message lighting up my screen. This time, Claire had gone too far. Even her doting parents were showing faint signs of disapproval. While it was true I had no claim to the Bishop family fortune, I was, for all intents and purposes, the family's younger son. In our world, appearances are everything. To maintain the crucial Bishop-Sterling alliance, a certain level of decorum was required. Claire's blatant disregard for it was starting to create fractures in that foundation. The Bishops were murmuring, and in response, my father-in-law arranged a family dinner as a gesture of apology. At dinner, Claire was radiant, but her father's expression was grim. He forced a smile as he beckoned me to the table. Leo, Claire's been buried in work lately and has neglected you. Please be understanding. I promise, I'm going to have a serious talk with her. Here, let me pour you a drink. He paused, then added, we can't let a small thing like this damage the relationship between our families. I will give you a satisfactory answer. I raised my lips into a perfectly calibrated smile, nodded, and downed a glass of whiskey in one smooth motion. Some things are better left unsaid. Some problems don't need to be dragged into the light. Claire's smile was just as forced. She knew keeping a lover was one thing, something done in the shadows, but getting caught was a cardinal sin. She had overplayed her hand, and the Bishop family's pride was not something to be trifled with. Her recklessness had already cost her family dearly. The Bishops had quietly canceled several key joint ventures, resulting in losses easily north of $100 million. My father-in-law shot her a dark look. "Aren't you going to apologize?" he said, his voice cold. Claire turned to me, her lips curling into a semblance of an apology. The insincerity was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Leo, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was looking after Dylan, but I admit I handled it badly." When I said nothing, she continued, unfazed, weaving her web of flimsy excuses. "Dylan is Megan Vance's distant cousin. She asked me to look out for him, and you know how it is. I couldn't say no to my best friend. But don't worry," she went on. "It will never happen again. Dylan is moving abroad next month. After that, I'll devote myself completely to you. Leo, you know I love you." 3 years ago, Dylan Ryder had entered our lives, and he'd been a chasm between Claire and me ever since. It wasn't that I hadn't tried to save our marriage. My love for Claire had taken root in childhood and grown for 2 decades. But reality had crushed that love again and again. Every effort I made was like throwing stones into the ocean. No sound, no ripple, nothing. I had to admit, when a woman's heart turns to ice, the cold is absolute. Hearing that Dylan was supposedly leaving the country, my in-laws finally managed genuine smiles. They laughed, trying to sweep the past year's ugliness under the rug and steer everything back to normal. "You hear that, Leo? Claire still has you in her heart. Once Dylan is gone, you two can settle down and live a quiet life. Time to start thinking about a baby. It's bad form to refuse an olive branch." I played along, smiling as I raised my glass and clinked it against theirs. On the surface, it was all peace and harmony. But everyone at that table knew what had happened over the last year. How could we possibly pretend it was nothing? "Claire, do you really think sending Dylan away will solve everything?" I laughed to myself, my face a mask of concern as I carefully placed a piece of steak on her plate. "Claire, you must be exhausted from all the travel. Where is Dylan planning to study abroad? Does he need any help from my end?" I asked, my voice dripping with false sincerity. "Maybe we should have him move to Chicago. It would save you the trouble of running back and forth. It hurts me to see you so worn out." My concern made the smile freeze on Claire's face. My father-in-law and mother-in-law shifted awkwardly in their seats. This was the consequence of their indulgence, wasn't it? I was merely playing the part they wanted, maintaining the fragile peace. I was done with the Sterlings. All of them. Now I was just waiting for the right moment. The Sterling Corporation was a tempting prize, a cake anyone would want a piece of. Leo, that won't be necessary," Claire stammered. "Dylan is used to Lake Geneva, and he's leaving soon anyway. No need to uproot him." She pushed her chair back. "I'm a little tired. I think I'll go upstairs and rest. After he's gone, I promise I'll make it up to you." "I'm sorry." She started to leave, but before she reached the dining room door, her father's angry voice stopped her cold. "Sit down. This is a family dinner. What does it look like for you to leave early? This is your mess to begin with. If you walk out that door, you are no longer my daughter." Defeated, Claire slumped back into her seat. Lately, the internal power struggles at Sterling Corp. had intensified. After giving birth to Claire, her mother had been unable to have more children. So, her father brought home the illegitimate son he'd kept hidden for years and gave him a senior position at the company. Claire's position as heir was suddenly precarious. The pressure was immense. One wrong move, and the Sterling Empire would fall into someone else's hands. After the charade of a dinner finally ended, Claire and I walked back to our bedroom arm in arm, the picture of a loving couple. Under the watchful eyes of her parents, we were seamless. But the moment the door clicked shut, the paper-thin facade tore apart, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "Leo, I can't believe how pathetic you are, running to my parents to complain," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "You should know how to handle things like this by now. So much for holding it in." I had seen Dylan Ryder once. I had to admit, he was handsome, the kind of man who could easily turn a woman's head. But looking at Claire now, this woman who was both a stranger and my wife, I felt nothing. I kept my lips sealed. Over the past year, we had said everything there was to say, argued every point into the ground. All that was left between us was a marriage certificate and the public performance of affection for our families. I truly couldn't understand her. Our marriage was a business arrangement, yes, but did it have to be this toxic? Claire stared back at me, her eyes cold. What she said next didn't surprise me at all. Leo, I'll admit it. I'm in love with Dylan. But I've given you face. I kept him out of Chicago. And I'll use protection until our child is born. I'll at least give you that dignity. She paused, her voice growing colder still. I've done what our families asked. I married you. Don't push it. We can both have our own lives. Just don't interfere with mine. Seeing my stony silence, she pressed on. I'm sending him abroad next month. I won't see him again until after our baby is born. So don't make this any uglier than it has to be. Leo, we're in the same boat. I want the Sterling Corporation, and you're not content to be the bishop's son with no power. From now on, we're allies. She leaned in, her eyes locking onto mine. We will never get divorced. I will be the perfect Mrs. Bishop in public. Behind closed doors, I don't care what you do, as long as you're discreet. She held my gaze, a flicker of challenge in her eyes, waiting for my response. A slow smile spread across my face. She was right. It was time to lay all the cards on the table. Neither of us was the type to simply accept our fate. In Chicago, the story of Leo Bishop and Claire Sterling was a fairy tale that began in preschool. As far back as I can remember, wherever Claire was, I was right behind her. Our parents were close, and talk of uniting the families through us was a constant, friendly refrain. In business, our companies were inseparable partners, their operations deeply intertwined. Everyone in our circle simply assumed we would one day walk down the aisle. The first 3 years of our marriage were a blur of happiness. We were inseparable, building our lives and careers together. The memories of those days are still vivid. Then, a year ago, Dylan Ryder appeared out of nowhere. He was the distant cousin of Claire's best friend, Megan Vance. Claire was a stunning woman, a classic ice queen who commanded attention the moment she walked into a room. Megan had come to her asking for a favor. Her cousin needed a job, a foot in the door. Just like that, Dylan became Claire's personal assistant. I didn't think much of it at the time. Our relationship was built on more than just a family alliance. We had years of shared history. Besides, Claire had been groomed since birth to take over her family's company. She was far too smart to be derailed by a simple infatuation. But fate, it seems, has a cruel sense of humor. The impossible happened. Claire and Dylan crossed every line. And when a woman's heart strays, the signs are impossible to miss. At the time, the Sterling and Bishop corporations were in the middle of a critical joint project. Any scandal could have been catastrophic. When Claire's father found out, he acted quickly. But considering the Vance family's standing and Claire's fierce protests, his solution was weak. Dylan was simply transferred to the Milwaukee branch office. From that day forward, Claire's attitude toward me changed completely. The warmth was gone, replaced by a hollow performance of affection. I knew exactly who was to blame. The Vances, while not on the same level as the Bishops or Sterlings, were still a respected family in Chicago. But Dylan, as a member of a lesser branch of the family, was a nobody in our world. When I first suspected something was wrong, I tried to talk to Claire. I held on to one last thread of hope that she would end it. Our marriage was a merger of 2 dynasties. Divorce was not a simple matter. Claire, I want you to send Dylan out of the country and cut off all contact. I had pleaded back then. Whatever you want, I will do everything in my power to help you get it. But I will not have my love for you trampled on like this. I remember the desperation in my voice. The look she gave me was as cold as a frozen lake. Leo, stay out of my business with Dylan, and I'll stay out of yours. Once we have a child, we can live separate lives. It's a strategic marriage. Don't be so dramatic. She added, I will fulfill my duties as Mrs. Bishop. But don't you forget, I am also the heir to the Sterling fortune. You do well to remember your place. In that instant, every ounce of love I had for her vanished like smoke. 20 years of devotion buried by her own hand. It finally hit me. In this marriage, I was just the bishop's son with no inheritance. And she was not only my wife, but the powerful, untouchable heir to the Sterling throne. I've always known the bishop fortune would never be mine. That's why I spent my life orbiting Claire, even when it made me look weak. And it's why, even now, faced with these humiliating terms, I chose to endure it. But Claire, did you really think it would be that simple? My in-laws worked hard to patch things up. But the very next afternoon, Claire walked out of our house, got in her car, and drove straight to Lake Geneva. Dylan was supposedly leaving the country soon. Of course, she would seize this last chance to be with him. In our circle, gossip travels at the speed of light. I didn't need to hire AP. The whispers found their way to me. Claire and Dylan were supposedly inseparable, acting like a couple on a romantic getaway. While they weren't being completely flagrant, I knew what it was: a public retaliation for the family dinner, a power move designed to force me into submission. If it weren't for the tangled business dealings between our families, I have no doubt she would have thrown me out long ago. But none of it mattered anymore. I no longer wanted the woman she had become. As for the future, well, who can ever really say? Claire's recent behavior was so egregious that even my assistant couldn't hide his frustration. "Mr. Bishop, are you just going to let this happen? If this continues, you're going to become a laughingstock." A laughingstock? As if I didn't know. But I couldn't let it get to me. I remained calm, continuing with my work as if I weren't the man being publicly cuckolded. Seeing the indignation on my assistant's face, I almost smiled. "Get my brother's schedule for me. There's something important I need to discuss with him. As for Claire, let her do what she wants. Don't pay her any mind." My assistant stared at me, dumbfounded. The old me would never have taken this lying down. And my relationship with my older brother had always been coolly professional, at best. "Sir, Mrs. Bishop's behavior is out of control. You can't keep letting her walk all over you. If this goes on, that man will eventually become a threat to your position." I held up a hand, signaling for him to calm down. The Sterlings aren't panicking, so why should I? Besides, Claire has that illegitimate half-brother to worry about. This is going to get messy. Let's just sit back and watch. As for everything else, I had already set my pieces on the board. The person who would be checkmated in the end would not be me. In a quiet cafe, the rich aroma of coffee hanging in the air, I sat across from Megan Vance. She was hunched slightly, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Her discomfort was palpable. I leaned back, my own hands steepled, a playful smile on my face as I studied her. There was no trace of the anger of a betrayed husband. The air between us was tense. After all, the entire messy drama between Claire and me had started with her. If I chose to take my anger out on her, she would have no choice but to take it. "Megan, you're looking well." I began, my tone light and conversational. "How are the preparations for Dylan's trip abroad coming along? Need any help?" Her head snapped down, but not before I caught the flash of surprise in her eyes. "Leo, about Dylan. I am so sorry," she said, her voice soft and trembling. "I just wanted Claire to help him out a little. I never imagined he would be so reckless and cause such a mess. I truly apologize." She put on a convincing show of a fragile, innocent woman, her body quivering slightly. I had to suppress a laugh. We all moved in the same circles. We all knew who was who. Megan Vance was one of the heirs to her family's fortune. This damsel in distress act was insulting. "Megan, don't insult my intelligence by pretending I don't know what the Vance family is playing at," I said, my smile vanishing. My gaze sharpened, pinning her in place. "But let me ask you, do you really think the Bishop family will just swallow this and let you get away with it?" The color drained from her face. In that moment, she must have remembered that while the Vances were wealthy, they were new money. Compared to the old, established power of the Bishops, they were nothing. Megan had been leveraging her friendship with Claire to stir the pot, hoping to fish for benefits in the ensuing chaos. After a long silence, she finally looked up, her face ashen. "What do you want, Leo?" she whispered, her voice shaking. I could see the panic in her eyes. She knew that against the Bishops, she had no leverage. Her only asset was her relationship with Claire, and Claire was not the sole heir to the Sterling fortune. I took a sip of my black coffee, savoring the bitter, unadulterated taste as it slid down my throat. My calm demeanor seemed to unravel her completely. She opened her mouth to speak several times, but the words wouldn't come. "Megan, I know your whole plan," I said, placing the cup down deliberately. "I'm not going to interfere. You and Claire can proceed as you intended. However," I continued, If the Vance family wants to maintain its current standing, you will listen to me. There are some things I need you to do." Her face grew even paler, as if she knew what was coming. Looking at her, I couldn't help but think what a poor choice of an ally Claire had made. I pushed a manila envelope across the table. "Open it." Her hands trembled as she unfastened the clasp. She only had a glance at the first few pages before all the blood left her face. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with terror. "Leo, you can't." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. So now she was scared. "Megan, Claire's husband will only ever be me. You have one choice to make. I suggest you make the right one." For an entire month, Claire never came home. I didn't care. As for Dylan, he didn't go abroad as promised. The Vance family hosted a lavish gala to thank their business partners. I had other commitments and arrived late. As I stepped into the grand ballroom, the glittering chandeliers and the hum of conversation washed over me. But my eyes immediately locked on a familiar sight, Dylan Ryder, standing proudly by Claire's side, acting as her date. They stood so close, a silent wall around them that no one else could penetrate. My expression remained neutral. I walked calmly toward them. On my way, I plucked a glass of red wine from a passing waiter's tray. Without breaking stride, I reached them and flung the entire contents of the glass into Dylan's face. "You!" Dylan exploded, his handsome face contorting with rage. He never imagined I would humiliate him so publicly, but I was done indulging him. When he and Claire were sneaking around, I had held my tongue, but now, parading around in the open, trying to trample on my name, on the Bishop family's name, my patience had run out. I followed the wine with a series of sharp, stinging slaps across his face. The pent-up fury of the past year finally had an outlet. Did he really think Leo Bishop was some pushover he could mock without consequence? Before I could do more, Claire reacted, jumping in front of Dylan and glaring at me. "Leo, have you lost your mind? What the hell do you think you're doing? This is the Vances party." I stopped, a contemptuous sneer on my face. "Claire, haven't I given you enough rope? What do you take my family for? You are shameless." If she was done with decency, then so was I. Claire seemed to realize the gravity of the situation. The entire ballroom had fallen silent, all eyes on us. Still, she was too proud to back down. Not that it mattered. From this moment on, I was changing the rules of the game. Dylan, however, was still a fool. Probably feeling secure on his family's home turf, he puffed out his chest. "Mr. Bishop, for Claire's sake, I'll overlook this. But I suggest you stay out of our business. I'm her assistant. Is there a problem with me escorting her to a party? If anything, your behavior is a disgrace to the Bishop name." He then turned to Claire, his eyes filled with a look of adoration. At his words, a murmur went through the crowd. Everyone there knew about their affair. It was an open secret. As long as it was kept reasonably quiet, people looked the other way. But to be caught by the husband and still act this arrogantly was unheard of. More importantly, the Bishop family's influence was at its peak. Whether I had inheritance rights or not, I represented their name. "Leo," Dylan already explained. Claire finally said, her voice tight. "He's just my assistant, here with me for a work event. Stop projecting your filthy thoughts onto me. Now apologize to Dylan. We could talk about the rest when we get home." Her explanation was worse than silence. I snorted with derision. "Apologize, fine. Tell him to get on his knees, and I'll apologize." The words made Claire's face turn white with rage. Ignoring them both, I turned and walked directly toward her illegitimate half-brother, who was standing across the room. "She want to play games? Fine. Two could play." Seeing my move, Claire's eyes narrowed, her expression unreadable. She had no grounds to stop me. She could only watch as I greeted her brother with a wide smile, engaging him in a friendly conversation. People always have to pay a price for their arrogance. Claire Sterling, once the untouchable heir, I would never give her the chance to feel regret. This war she started would end with my victory. The scene at the party spread through Chicago's elite circles like wildfire. Claire's reckless behavior had finally backfired, making her the butt of every joke. In the aftermath, the partnership between the Bishop and Sterling corporations ground to a halt. My in-laws were frantic. The Bishop's side was non-committal, neither refusing to cooperate nor moving projects forward, simply letting everything stall. They knew exactly who was to blame. With no other options, the old couple had to come to me. The public fight had created a deep rift between the two families, and I had long since moved out of the home I once shared with Claire. I couldn't stand being surrounded by her things. It felt like being coated in filth. Now, there were betting pools on when Claire and I would finally divorce. Our marriage had become cheap entertainment. Leo, about this whole situation. My father-in-law began, sitting across from me, his expression pained. He knew he had failed to deliver on his promise to send Dylan away, and this was the result. I smiled, a slow, deliberate expression. You know, sir, perhaps it's time for the Sterling Corporation to consider a new heir. Your son seems quite capable, don't you think? He hesitated, a flicker of conflict in his eyes. This was a monumental decision, one that would shape the future of his company, and his wife, Claire's mother, would be fiercely opposed. But the Bishop partnership was a project years in the making. It was crucial for Sterling Corp's survival. After a long, agonizing silence, he finally gritted his teeth and nodded. The news sent shockwaves through the business community. And, as expected, the Bishop Sterling contracts were signed shortly after. It didn't take long for Claire to show up at my door. Her face was a thundercloud, her jaw clenched. At least this time, she had the sense not to bring Dylan with her. "Where's your assistant today, Miss Sterling?" "How surprising," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. A flash of anger crossed her face, but she quickly suppressed it. She knew she was here to beg, not to fight. "Dylan is preparing to go abroad," she said, her voice strained. "What happened the other night? I admit my judgment was poor, but there were reasons he couldn't leave on schedule." The once proud, untouchable woman was now attempting a look of conciliation. "I came today to explain. We're husband and wife. There's no need to make things so ugly." I ignored her pathetic attempt, shifting into a more comfortable position on the sofa. "Miss Sterling," I said, a playful smile on my lips, "if this is about business, please get to the point. Otherwise, we have nothing to talk about. As for being husband and wife, you seem to have forgotten that for the past year. Let's not bring it up again." Her forced smile froze. After a long moment, she tried again. "Leo, about that incident, I cut her off with an impatient wave of my hand. "Enough. I don't want to hear a word you have to say. What? You humiliate me in public, and now you think a few soft words will get you your inheritance back. Who do you think you are? And what do you take me for?" Claire's attempt at a truce ended as disastrously as it began. Our relationship and the relationship between our families had hit rock bottom. Meddling in their line of succession was, admittedly, not my place as an outsider. But so what? If they wanted to continue working with the Bishops, they had to pay a price for their actions. Claire was their daughter, raised and educated by them. Dylan was the mess they had failed to clean up. Why should I let myself be their doormat just to protect their precious reputation? I knew my moves had pushed Claire into a corner, and a cornered animal is a dangerous one. She would never accept defeat. I settled in to watch the show. Sure enough, a week later, under immense pressure from the Bishop's side of the family, Claire came to me again. This time, her demeanor was completely different. Her voice was practically dripping with honey. "Leo, I was completely in the wrong before. I swear, Dylan is leaving next week. I promise you, I will never see him again. Okay." She paused, her eyes pleading. "From now on, we'll live our lives properly. I don't even want to be the Sterling heir anymore." I watched her, my face placid, a faint smile on my lips. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was about to make a major move, and to prevent any interference from my family, she needed to neutralize me first. "All right," I said slowly, "if you can keep your word, then perhaps we can go back to how things were." My response clearly pleased her. She lowered her gaze for a moment before looking up at me cautiously. "There's just one thing, Leo. Dylan wants to take a trip out west before he leaves, see the salt flats in Utah." She must have seen the skepticism in my eyes because she rushed to add, "My parents will be with us the whole time. I swear, I will not do anything to disrespect you." When I remained silent, a flicker of panic crossed her face, and she began to swear her loyalty. I watched her performance, a gentle smile fixed on my face. I reached out and softly stroked her hair, then nodded. "Okay, but you remember what you said. This is your last chance. You know what will happen if you break your promise again." Relief washed over her face. She beamed, leaned in, and gave me a quick, chaste kiss on the cheek. Then she practically skipped away to pack for her trip, as if all our troubles had simply vanished. A wry smile played on my lips as I watched her leave. If Megan hadn't told me Claire's entire plan, I might have actually been fooled by her act. Sure enough, the next morning, the whole Sterling clan set off for their trip out west, leaving the illegitimate son in charge of the company. The very same day they arrived in the Utah desert, tragedy struck. The Sterling heir was killed in a brutal car crash. When I arrived at the scene, it was pure chaos. A semi-truck carrying 100 tons of steel had collided with a sedan, crushing it into an unrecognizable hunk of metal. The man was pinned underneath. It didn't take a paramedic to know he was gone, leaving behind nothing but a bloody ruin. Such a vicious, cold-blooded move. A classic Sterling tactic, executed with ruthless precision by Claire herself, eliminating her own half-brother without a second thought. People at the scene were frantically trying to call the family, but no one could get through to Claire or her parents. With no one else to turn to, I, the son-in-law, was thrust into the role of crisis manager. With the full authorization of the Sterling board, I suppressed my own turmoil and began directing the cleanup, my voice calm and steady. By the time everything was handled, a full day and night had passed. I dragged my exhausted body home, only to find someone waiting for me. It was Megan. She stood in my living room, her face a pale, grim mask. She looked like a ghost, her eyes hollow and devoid of light. I frowned but gestured for her to come in. Leo. Her voice was a dry, ragged croak, as if she hadn't had a drop of water in days. Her eyes were webbed with red veins. Leo, I did what Claire asked, and what you asked for will be done soon. But, are you sure about this? I glanced at her, then out the window. The sky was beginning to pale in the east. A new day was coming. Faced with her raw fear, I just smiled softly. I poured her a glass of red wine and said, Megan, the sun is rising, and the Vance Corporation is about to have its best year ever, isn't it? She stared at me, her expression a mix of awe and terror, and finally let out a long, shuddering sigh. Leo, do you really hate her that much? I thought for a moment. Hate is the wrong word, I said honestly. When we got married, I wanted to be happy with her, even if it meant being the powerless, rich kid for the rest of my life. I looked at her, but things don't always work out the way we plan. You know that better than anyone. After a long pause, she gave a bitter laugh. So, once the love was gone, you wouldn't leave her even a sliver of a chance, would you? I raised my glass and gently tapped it against hers. I was merely following her lead. I said, my voice impossibly calm. My methods were just a little more effective than hers, wouldn't you say? Megan fell silent. The room was heavy with what was unsaid. My mind drifted back. When Claire and Dylan first got together, I had done everything to try and win her back. 20 years of my life had been devoted to her. How could I just let go? How could I believe the person sleeping next to me was my enemy? Once, frantic with worry, I had driven all the way to Lake Geneva to bring her home. As I reached the door of the private club she was in, I heard her voice and Megan's from inside. Claire, are you sure about giving up on Leo? It's a shame. Yeah, though it is you. And my cousin. His family isn't in your league. The Sterlings will never approve. Megan's voice was laced with concern. I froze, my hand on the doorknob. I needed to know why. Why would she throw away everything I'd given her? Then I heard Claire's cold, clear voice. What good is his adoration? The bishops are putting too much pressure on us. I know their game. They're just waiting for us to have a child, so they can absorb Sterling Corp. Completely. As for your cousin, she continued, I have no intention of marrying him. His only purpose is to help me get rid of my half-brother. And once Leo is dead, his 10% dividend rights in Bishop Corp will transfer to me. Then, I can find a new husband who knows his place. The memory faded, and I was back in my living room, with Megan watching me nervously. I smiled faintly. Oh, Claire, the bishops never had any intention of absorbing your company. They simply saw the Sterlings as a suitable match for the son who would never inherit. I wonder, do you regret it now? Don't worry. I will never give you the chance. Goodbye, my love. After Megan left, my assistant lingered, his expression hesitant. I knew he was bursting with questions, chief among them being why the Vance family had cooperated so completely, without a hint of betrayal. I looked at him, my gaze steady. The Vances got involved in this mess for one reason. Profit, I explained slowly. To people like them, Everything is a transaction. You have to understand, whatever the Sterlings could offer them, the bishops could offer more. And once we took over Sterling Corp, we could offer them double. That a temptation they couldn't possibly resist. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Now consider Claire's plan. The Vances were just her pawns, the ones doing the dirty work. They accumulated a lot of dirt along the way. To the Sterlings, that dirt was a weapon they could use to control the Vances forever. To the bishops, it's leverage. Faced with a mountain of profit on one side and the threat of total ruin on the other, what choice did they have but to obey? This is why I had to wait for Claire to make the first move. With that, I sighed and turned toward my bedroom. The game was over. All I had to do now was wait to collect my winnings. With the Sterling heir dead and the rest of the family unreachable on their vacation, the company was thrown into chaos. There was no leadership. Reluctantly, the board asked me to step in and take control. With the formidable backing of the Bishop Corporation, I leveraged our vast resources to stabilize the situation, calming panicked investors and restoring order. It didn't take long to get the Sterling ship righted. A week later, my assistant entered my new office at Sterling Tower, followed by several grim-faced police officers. "Mr. Bishop," my assistant said, his voice trembling slightly. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling and their daughter. They got lost while hiking in the desert. They were reported missing. A search party was sent out, but by the time they were found, they were all gone." One of the officers stepped forward, his expression somber. "Based on our preliminary investigation, we have ruled out foul play. Mr. Bishop, please accept our condolences." The news landed with a dull thud in my chest. On the outside, I remained perfectly still. After escorting the police out, I took a deep breath and turned to my assistant, my voice cool and decisive. "Start the process of assuming full control of the Sterling Corporation. I want every detail handled flawlessly." With the entire direct line of the Sterling family gone, the laws of succession were clear. The only person with a legal claim to the inheritance was Claire Sterling's husband, me. The great Sterling Corporation was about to have a new name over the door. In the quiet, manicured graveyard, surrounded by cypress trees and rows of silent headstones, I stood alone before Claire's grave. The photograph on the marble was as beautiful as I remembered, a frozen moment of a life now extinguished. I leaned down and placed a bouquet of yellow flowers at the base of the stone. The petals trembled in the slight breeze. She had, in her own way, delivered the entire Sterling Empire into my hands. She deserved at least this. I glanced over my shoulder. My assistant had, as instructed, cleared the cemetery of all other visitors. It was just me and the person I was waiting for. Dressed in a severe black dress, Megan Vance stood silently behind me, looking small and nervous. "Leo," she whispered, her voice barely disturbing the silence. "I've done everything you asked. Can you please let the Vance family off the hook now?" I turned to face her, looking her directly in the eye. She flinched, unable to meet my gaze. "Megan," I said, my voice calm and even, "we are all deeply saddened by the accidents that have befallen the Sterling family. But you don't need to worry. You were Claire's best friend, and you're a friend of mine. From now on, the Vance family will always be the most trusted partner of both the Bishop and Sterling corporations." Relief flooded her features. She nodded quickly, understanding the unspoken terms of our new reality. A moment later, I dismissed her. As her footsteps faded, the cemetery was silent once more. It was just me and Claire. The Sterling's trip out west was, of course, a carefully constructed alibi for the murder of the illegitimate son. But they had planned more than one accident that day. The second one was for me. They wanted my 10% dividend rights in the Bishop Corporation. In their eyes, I was the final obstacle to their ambition. But thanks to Megan's timely warning, I knew their entire plan. The Vance family hadn't folded easily, but faced with the monolithic power of the bishops, they knew they stood no chance. And they knew the Sterlings would never risk a direct war with my family over them. The choice was obvious. The Sterlings' plan was brilliant, full of intricate layers and ruthless ambition. But they miscalculated one crucial detail. It's true, I was bitter about my lack of inheritance. But I never, not for 1 second, coveted the throne of the Bishop family. And because I posed no threat to my own family's power, they were, and always would be my unbreakable shield. And now, this inheritance I've claimed. Isn't it the most beautiful irony of all?